and welcome to another edition of Africa Speaks here on Pan-African Television. My name is Makiza Latifa, and today's episode carries a special weight as we mark the anniversary of the Alliance of Sahel States, that is the AES. So over the past 2 years, this alliance has not only reshaped political and security dynamics in the Sahel, but it has also sparked important conversations about sovereignty, cooperation, and Africa's path to self-determination. So to set the stage, we turn to my colleague Daniel Asante, who takes us through an in-depth explainer on the main gains of the AES and what this 2-year milestone truly means for the region and the continent at large. Welcome to the show once again. Please stay with us.
Formed in September 2023 by Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, the Alliance of the Sahel States emerged as both a message and a movement, born from a rejection of Western influence through organizations like ECOWAS. The AES symbolized a collective bid for self-determination and sovereignty. This is the Spotlight segment on Africa Speaks, and my name is Danny Ochuesante. On September 16, the AES marks 2 years of building an alternative at every level, from security scenario to food self-sufficiency. A key aspect of the AES has been a focus on institutions that enable the countries to collaborate and make meaningful changes. It is still early in the day for the bloc, but it has managed to inspire an entire generation of Africans who see the possibility of a genuine change. At its core, AES is a confederation rooted in collective defense. Any attack on one is considered an attack on all, and it is no surprise that the security front has been a key focus for the bloc by early 2025. By early 2025, the alliance had advanced a 5,000-strong joint military force to combat jihadist insurgencies across their shared borders. This was complemented by coordinating military operation and diversified arms procurement, turning increasingly to partners like Russia and Turkey to enhance aerial and ground capabilities. AES has taken bold steps towards economic autonomy. In May 2025, it had launched the Confederal Bank for Investment and Development, seeded with 500 billion CFA francs intended to fund infrastructure, energy and transport projects without reliance on external institutions. Initiatives also include proposal for a common central bank, a new regional currency to replace the CFA francs, and export restriction on grain to non-member ECOWAS countries, all aimed at shifting control to local hands. Landlocked and geopolitical isolated, the AES states have sought new avenues to global trade. The planned Sahel Railway, announced in April 2025, aims to connect the trio with neighboring coastal countries, bolstering interregional commerce and transit. Beyond politics, AES fostering a shared identity. On January 29, 2025, it introduced a joint biometric passport, easing movement between member states. This was followed by unveiling a new alliance flag in February 2025 and signing a common cultural policy the following month. Small yet powerful symbols of unity, all the three countries have renamed public spaces, replacing the names given by colonial authorities with that of those who fought for sovereignty and dignity. The first ever AES Games, held in June 2025, with over 500 athletes competing in traditional and modern sports, further strengthened the regional camaraderie, responding to chronic food insecurity. AES launched the Alliance of Agricultural Seed Producers of the Sahel in the summer 2025. This initiative supports local seed research, production and distribution to cultivate regional food sovereignty. From joint defense and economic sovereignty to cultural cohesion and infrastructure, the Alliance of the Sahel State has made measurable strides in its quest for autonomy. It has boldly redefined regional cooperation, challenging colonial-era dependencies and chartering a path to self-reliance. Yet significant hurdles remain. Security threats persist. The economic stranglehold of the West will be difficult to break, and consolidating the role of the institution remains a pressing task. However, the first steps have been taken, and they have tapped into a powerful sentiment among the people, the desire for true independence, the refusal to bow to dictates of foreigners, and the belief that together they can build a new Africa. Back to you, Makiza.
Now, from the spotlight, we move on to our Experts Speak segment, where we take the conversation further with thought leaders and practitioners shaping Africa's future. Joining us today is the convener of the Accra Collective of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, Comrade Blaise Tulu. So he'll share his insights on the Alliance of Sahel States, its evolving role in redefining cooperation among member nations, and what its two-year journey tells us about Africa's broader struggle for unity and for sovereignty.
Well, welcome, Comrade Blaise, to Africa Speaks right here on Pan-African Television. This is the Expert Speak segment where we engage our guests to speak on the subject of the day. Today, on this week's episode, we are looking at the Alliance of the Sahel States. We know that 16th September will be the anniversary since the formation of the Alliance of the Sahel States. On our last episode, we spoke with one of our comrades to help us unpack how the bloc has been performing since the formation and since they detached from the ECOWAS. Today, we are here again because just about 2 or 3 days would be the anniversary, and we want people to understand what is happening in the Sahel. So to start off with, you know that over the past 2 years, the AES has gone from being a defensive alliance to what we know as experimenting in new institutions and development models. So can you tell us a bit about the concrete institutions and proposal that the AES has set up for regional cooperation and for development?
Well, thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you really for having me on this very important edition. The AES and the Sahel processes have become a very big inspiration to the working people of the region and to the broader masses of the world. It is instructive to note that this is not the first time that there's been an attempt to form an alliance, to form a confederation, because one of the biggest resolutions of the 5th Pan-African Conference that was held in Manchester is the unification of the African continent around the broader banner of scientific socialism. So any attempt that leads to the process of this unification is always a welcoming idea to the masses of our people. Ever since the AES was constructed, there have been very interesting proposals. There's been a very deliberate and conscious attempt to build institutions that will detach these 3 countries from the hook of the neo-colonial institutions that were set after the Second World War. One of such very important institutions is the Confederal Investment Bank, which is supposed to be a bank that will serve the development needs of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And we know that over the last 4 or 5 decades, West Africa has been hooked to Western imperialist institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. And what these institutions have done is to advance credit facilities to these neo-colonial governments that ends up in debt. And one of the biggest crises of our region is debt. So this new bank that has been proposed by the AES is an important first step to set up a bank that will address and serve the needs of the people. And it is important to understand the different models between the IMF and the bank that has been proposed for the AES. The IMF and the World Bank's main criteria is to advance what we call economic of averages. They're interested in economic growth, the statistics about GDP and GNP. I think that the main focus of this Confederal Investment Bank that has been proposed by the AES is to is to extend facility to these governments that allows them to develop the basic infrastructure that is needed for economic development. So this is a very important proposal, and we give it all our support. We hope that it will be materialized and will address the needs and aspirations of the people of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. One of the other important institutions that has been proposed is what they call the Common Biometric Passport, customs and measures that, and including what? The telecom integration. And this is very, very important. I mean, we live in West Africa. We are the same people. We have a very unique history of construction, but it's very difficult to move around West Africa. Of course, the ECOWAS has what it called the free movement of goods and services, but we know that this has not materialized. It's much more easier for capital to move around the region than for human beings to move around the region. So I think that the attempt to build one common passport, one common movement plan that allows our people to be able to trade among themselves is an important first step. One of the institutions that has also been proposed that gives me a lot of hope is the Joint Military and Security Unit. You know, we know that one of the important institutions that Nkrumah envisioned was a common military command on the continent that will address the security situation of the continent. Before the coup d'etats that took place in the Sahel, we know that more than 60% of the land territory of Burkina Faso was being controlled by insurgents, which means that security was one of the main concrete crises that led to the coup d'etats that happened. So forming a joint military force that allows them to address the security situation that is happening in the region is a very important step that the AES have begun to think about. And we hope that we can give them all of our support to ensure that these important institutions that have been itemized as important first step for the AES to develop itself are materialized.
Right. Thank you so much, Comrade Blaze. Indeed, these are very important and significant, institutions and proposals that have been put forth by the AES in this particular trying times. You know what? When you were speaking about the proposals that have been put in place, you made mention of the bank that they are trying to also, that is the Confederal Investment or Development Bank. That moves me to the economic sovereignty of the Sahel. We know that one of the biggest challenge faced by the AES is considering the influence of France that they have had for decades. So as a bloc, apart from the investment bank, what do you think is the path forward for the AES in consolidating economic sovereignty?
I mean, we first of all, I think that economic sovereignty is very important, but economic sovereignty is premised under the backdrop of political sovereignty. And the coup d'etats and the protection of the boundaries, the formation of the AES as a political instrument is very, very important. And I think that one of the main crises of West Africa is who controls the commanding heights of our economy. And specifically to the countries of the AES, the commanding heights of their economy has been for decades controlled, orchestrated by France and US imperialism. And the resources of these countries are not controlled by the people of the Sahel. We know that the gold, the uranium, the land resources are all in the hands of how do you call it, of France. And we also know that even the currency that is operated around France, West Africa is controlled by France. We know that France keeps its foreign reserves at the Central Bank of France. And whenever they have to, go for credit, they go for credit and they have to pay with a lot of interest. So I think that the important first steps, which I am reliably informed have been taken, is that most of the mines in the Sahel have been taken over by the new regime, which are very important in consolidating the economy that they need to control as the people of the Sahel. The other thing that we discuss is the bank. I mean, you cannot finance your concrete development measures without a development bank that has the needs and aspirations of the working people. So this bank that is about to be set up must solely focus on extending credit to the agents of development that addresses the infrastructural deficit of the people of the Sahel. You know, they need to construct schools, bridges, hospitals. The bank needs to concentrate itself on the concrete things that matter to the people, the concrete things that have been denied to the people of West Africa for so many decades. You know, so the bank is important, the mines are important, the political sovereignty of the people is important, and just the consciousness of the people that they need to control their resources for the development of themselves are important first step, and we need to defend these measures that has been taken by the AES. So first of all is to defend the political sovereignty, and the political sovereignty is seen and expressed in the formation of the AES. And the second, and we are seeing it already, is to take over the mines, to take over the natural resources of our people and harness them for the development of our people. And the third step is to make sure that this bank is really focused on dealing with the concrete needs of our people, which is to address the issues of unemployment, to address the issues of education, healthcare, and agriculture. And one of the areas that I think that they have taken very seriously is agriculture. You can see that in Burkina Faso and in Mali, they have prioritized agriculture, which is a very important sector that needs to be controlled. We need to control what we eat. You know, we can no longer be in a situation where everything that we eat or we consume is, you know, imported from Europe. And just few years ago, we know that the European Union wanted to sign an economic partnership agreement on the continent that allows us to open our market, you know, for them to dump all the goods that they have from Europe. I think that the consolidation of the AES will help them to integrate their own economy, trade among themselves, and be able to address the needs and aspirations of the working people of the Sahel, which is very, very important in consolidating the AES processes.
Right. Thank you so much, Comrade, please. You know, we've been talking about the AES, and anytime we talk about the AES, we are concerned about the countries that are involved in this bloc, that is Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. But today I want us to look exactly at countries that are not part of the bloc. So can you tell us about the significance of the AES to people outside these three countries? That is outside Burkina Faso, outside Niger, outside Mali. What does the AES mean for those active in anti-imperialist struggle across the continent?
I think this is a very, very important question. And I think that the process of even having this interview and this important discussion is premised under the backdrop of commemorating the second anniversary of the formation of the AES. I think that it was very clear that after the AES was formed, and after even the junta took over the reins of power in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, we saw the mass popularity, the mass endorsement of the working people of the entire region that rallied themselves in support of the processes that has unfolded in the AES. We know very well that ECOWAS had taken a decision to invade Niger after the coup happened. And we know very well that Nigerian parliament actually voted against it and said that we are not going to allow any military invasion in Niger. We saw the mass support that happened across the region, you know, in saying that, look, we had come to a time where we will not allow neo-colonial puppets to determine the destiny of our people. So I think that there's a broad consciousness around the West African region. I mean, if Nigeria's parliament kicked against any military invasion in Niger, it tells you the level of endorsement that this AES process have commanded in the minds of the working people of the region. Nigeria is one of the biggest economy of the region. Nigeria is one of the most populous country in the region. So to have the tacit endorsement of the people of Nigeria was very, very significant for us. We know that in Ghana, there were various organizations that expressed solidarity with the AES process. The Socialist Movement of Ghana, where the West African People's Organization, the Pan-Africanism Today Secretariat, the International People's Assembly, which is a platform of mass movement across the world, all have been in solidarity with the processes that have unfolded in, how do you call it, in the Sahel. But it is instructive to also note that counter-revolutionary elements have sought to undermine this process. We know that very well that, for example, France have used La Côte d'Ivoire and Benin as centers to try to destabilize the processes that have unfolded in the Sahel. We know that several coup attempts have already been undertaken under the charismatic leader of Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso. So I think that the people are conscious about it. We are not talking about even state-to-state relationship. We're just talking about the mass command of movements and organizations across the region that are in solidarity with the AES process. And Victoria, we are doing this because we are conscious of our history.
Right.
We know that in the 1960s, Nkrumah attempted to form a confederation between Mali, Ghana, and Guinea.
Yeah.
And the process of forming that alliance also led to the conditions that led to the overthrow of the Nkrumah regime in 1966. And the overthrow of the Nkrumah regime in 1966 was that last act that completely destabilized the attempt to form the unification of the African continent. So our people are aware about that history. We are conscious about it, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that we defend the processes that are unfolding in the Sahel. These are important first steps. We need to defend them and ensure that we expand. I don't think that it should just lead to these three countries. We should mobilize our people to a level where most of our countries can form the alliance so that we can be bigger, we can be stronger, and we can be able to stand the neo-colonial legacy that has plundered our people into poverty, into deprivation, into dehumanizing conditions that we are trying to struggle against.
Right, thank you. Indeed, we are conscious, and then we continue to step forward to challenge the shackles of neocolonialism and anti-imperialism. You did right well by telling us about the solidarity campaigns or the wave of solidarity that's happened throughout the country, other countries, and then people's movements in support of this particular project of the AES. I want to know, from the perspective of people's movement on the Sahel region, what is the future of the AES? What is your vision from the movement's perspective?
I think that the AES has a lot of future. Over the last 2 years, they have demonstrated that our people, if left by themselves, can change their own destiny.
Right.
Before the coup d'etats, Victoria, we know that Niger was one of the worst economies in the globe.
Yeah.
2 years, look at the massive progress that has happened in Niger. Niger last year almost became the fastest growing economy, in the world. This is astronomical, you understand? So I think that the AES are demonstrating to us really concretely, they are reviving the Nkrumah's vision. They are reviving the Pan-Africanist project. They are reviving the People's Project. And it is giving our people confidence, the confidence that they need. I mean, when we see Ibrahim Traore, we see in him the embodiment of the wishes and aspirations of the people. And that is very heavy. It tells us that if left alone, we can do it by ourselves, and that we don't need the IMF, we don't need the World Bank, we don't need all these neo-colonial institutions that were set up to grab our legs from advancing the development project that Nkrumah so much envisaged. So I think that, over it's just 2 years, but the level of development that have emanated from the AES processes is something that gives our people a lot of inspiration. I mean, Victoria, you know very well that on the 7th of January, when we elected a new president, and at the inauguration, Ibrahim Traore appeared at the event, and had the loudest applause. It just tells you that our people understand the current moment in which we are in, which is very important, because political circumstances present themselves in different moments. So it's either we take advantage of it or we lose it forever.
Right.
And I am convinced, guided by the experience of the AES over the last 2 years, that the masses of our people are convinced more than ever that we have the capacity to advance the wishes and aspirations of our people. So we need to make it our political project. We must not allow it to fade. We must organize political education, which we are doing at the level of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, the Pan-Africanism Today Secretariat, the WAPO process, and the IPA process. We all must galvanize our human resource, our natural resource, to change the course of our people. We have had the opportunity to go around West Africa. We know the living standards of our people. Our people are living in poverty. Our people are living in depression. And I'm told that in Niger now, the life expectancy has improved, which is something that we need to be inspired about. So, Victoria, it's an important moment for West Africa. It's an important moment for the African continent. And I am convinced that, guided by the mass mobilizations that have happened over the last 2 years, we are going to defend this project. And come 16th of September, which commemorates the 2nd anniversary of the formation of the AES, we want all of us to be on the street. We want all of us to issue statements. Let's build a global consciousness about this important moment in our history that tells us that the people of our continent, the people of West Africa, can chart their own economic path, can chart their own political path, and can build their own destiny. This is important for our people, and we must defend it at all costs.
Thank you so much. Indeed, let's rally behind the AES to say that, yes, we can manage our own affairs. In fact, this even reminds me that the AES is actually reaffirming the statement that was made years ago by Kwame Nkrumah, that the Black man is indeed capable of managing their own affairs. They are showing us that path, and then we would have to rally behind them and support them at all costs. Thank you so much, Comrade Blaze, for this insightful conversations. We wish to have you more on our show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and raise salute to all the comrades and friends at Pan-African Television. And thank you very much for amplifying the People's Project. This is what Pan-African Television was built to achieve, and we are very proud about what all the comrades are doing in Ghana.
Well, thank you so much. So this is a build-up to the anniversary of the formation of the AES come 16th September. So we are calling on all progressive movements, all countries to join hands, to be on the street, to amplify the voice and this living example that is happening in the Sahel. This is an historic moment. We would have to support and champion this cause.
From expert analysis, we now turn to the heartbeat of the movement, like I always describe it, the people themselves. In this segment of Voices on the Ground, we bring you solidarity messages from comrades across progressive organizations who stand in support of the Alliance of Sahel States. So their words reflect not just encouragement, but also a shared vision of African peoples rising together for dignity, for sovereignty, and for justice.
Just like the Ghana-Guinea-Mali Union championed by Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the founder of modern-day Ghana. Yet again, a group of countries on the African continent, precisely Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, have come together to form a union called the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. And it is their second anniversary. On this day, I congratulate the AES, and I want to tell them that the youth of the continent look up to them. The whole continent is behind them. Look, AES has been able to exert their sovereignty. They have done away with Western influence and manipulations. They've developed their own framework of development, which is admirable. And it is important that we encourage other lefts and progressive organizations on the continent, other countries, our government, to support the AES, to join the AES, to advance the struggle of liberating the African continent and actualizing the dream of our forebears. Our forebears dreamt of a continental body or a country that has one security, that has one economic framework, that has one currency and all that. And this is exactly the line the AES is towing, and therefore we must encourage them. Congratulations, AES. In our country, we say Aiko. Aiko on such a feat. A mandla to the people of the Sahel state. And Viva to the Alliance of Sahel State. We are solidly behind you, and don't ever waver. Don't ever shake. We are solidly behind you. And we know we are going to win. We are going to win with you. The people do not wait for ideas. The people do not wait for political philosophies. What the people wait for is resolving their concrete reality, the day-to-day challenges they face. And that is exactly what you are doing as a continental body. Do not shake, for you have the spirit of our forebears right behind you. You have the youth of Africa solidly behind you. We are solidly behind you. Ayuko, happy second anniversary. Viva AES, viva.
And this is still Africa Speaks here on Pan-African Television with me, Makiza Latifa. We now move on to Dispatches, where we bring you reports and updates from across the continent. You remember the last week we heard from Solon Senoho, a union leader from Lesotho, who spoke about the plight of textile workers following the devastating tariffs imposed by US President Donald Trump. So in April, Lesotho briefly faced 50% tariffs, and though these were later reduced, the damage to the textile industry and to workers' livelihoods was already immense. So this week, we continue the conversation with Jonas Gedi Alaso of the Pan-Africanism Today Secretariat. Jonas has just returned from Lesotho, where he met with people's movements and communities directly affected. So he brings us a first-hand account of how these trade measures have reshaped the textile sector, the struggles of workers, and the broader fight for economic justice in Southern Africa. Also in this week's Dispatches, we turn to Accra, Ghana, where veteran journalist and activist Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jr. of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, who doubles as the director of Pan-African Television, has launched his latest book on reparations. The book speaks directly to one of the most urgent questions of our time: how African nations and peoples of African descent can advance the struggle for justice, redress, and the return of wealth stolen through slavery and colonialism. At the launch, Comrade Pratt emphasized that reparations are not just about the past, but also about shaping Africa's future, building sovereignty, dignity, and economic independence. If you missed out, you might want to stay glued to your TV sets for all the sights and sound bites from the remarkable event.
Thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to explain what I think is a very important development on the African continent. Because despite being quite a small country of 2.3 million people, Lesotho symbolizes some of the challenges that I think extend beyond that very small mountainous kingdom. Because the reality, as you may well know, is that the tariffs that have been imposed by the United States, it started at 50% and then eventually was brought down to 15%, have really had a devastating effect on what is more or less the only substantial industrial manufacturing economic activity in the country. So in a sector where 40,000 workers were employed a few months ago, almost overnight, 13,000 jobs have been shed. Of the people who are left who still have work, they don't actually have work because they've been told by their factories to go home and they won't get paid. They're not really fired, but they're not employed either. They're not getting paid. They're waiting at home effectively on short time. Whilst the industry tries to figure out what its next steps are, because for all intents and purposes, these tariffs, and really it doesn't matter what the scale of the tariffs is, they have made the economic viability of producing textiles in Lesotho for export to the United States market an unviable economic enterprise. And this is a huge challenge because in a country where you already are sitting with about 50% of the population living in poverty, where you are sitting with 30%, but in reality closer to 50% unemployment rates, to then effectively collapse the only real industry that exists, is having a devastating impact. So, and we are not talking about people who are earning enormous salaries. I think the average wage in the textile sector was about 140 US dollars per month. So these are really starvation wages that people had been paid, and now even those starvation wages are gone. And it's important to kind of contextualize a little bit the economy of Lesotho, because in the mid 19th century, Lesotho was one of the most important agricultural centers of Southern Africa. They were not just producing enough food to feed themselves, but also producing enough food to feed parts of Southern Africa and exporting it out of the country. But the kind of discovery of diamonds and gold in South Africa and the colonial project of creating a cheap labor force led to the introduction of hut taxes. It led to mechanisms via which people effectively very productive peasant farmers of Lesotho were forced into the labor market. And that has had a domino effect where not just the social fabric of the country has been compromised for almost a century and a half, but it also meant that as those mining jobs became less and less, and from about the 1990s, many of these men whose grandfathers had been successful peasant farmers, who then became mine workers, were going back home to nothing. So there was a large extent to which the economy of Lesotho was at that point neither an agricultural economy, nor was it an economy where migrant workers were able to send remittances back home. And the introduction of AGOA, the kind of policy that is being contested at the moment, in 2000 was an opportunity for economic development. Now, I think we need to remember that the Basotho people didn't really benefit from that all that much, because what ended up happening is that largely factories owned by Taiwanese capital were setting up shop in Lesotho to take advantage of these extremely cheap wages and then access duty-free the United States market. And in recent months, there's been a lot of talk about Trump and his tariffs on basically the entire world. There's been a lot of talk about how that has affected the allies of the United States, etc. But really the kind of deprivation that has been caused inside Lesotho, which is already a poor country, which now is going from poverty to extreme poverty, largely as a result of this kind of haphazard decision to impose these exorbitant tariffs and therefore collapsing the only real industry in the country. What the state has done, or the government has done in July this year, is declared a state of disaster, and are doing what every country is saying they're doing, which is to diversify their markets. They're looking for new markets. But the truth is, I mean, that's not something that you can do overnight, A, and B, everyone is doing that. So the problem of competing for new markets is still a challenge. And therefore, the kind of popular organizations on the ground have really recognized that it's in their hands to determine what is going to become of this moment. The country is absolutely in a crisis. economically, socially, politically, and this didn't happen a few months ago, but has been hugely amplified over the last few months. And what has been the consequence now is that organizations, trade unions in particular, trade union federations, are starting to not just talk among one another, but are also starting to reach out to other sectors of society to say that what we need to do at this particular moment is not just insist that a state of disaster by itself does not end the disaster. We need to start looking at what is the new economic model that can emerge out of this, which is not dependent on the US market, which is not going to maintain the kind of Basotho people at the receiving end and dependent on other larger economies. And here there are a few discussions that have been floating around. Of course, there is an urgency to say that AGOA, which is up for renewal or not in September this year, should be renewed just to buy time in a country that is confronted with a significant crisis. But also ultimately what we need to do is reclaim regional and continental initiatives, including things like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And what I mean by reclaim here, or what the organizations on the ground are saying, is that reclaiming this is not just about saying we need to have an alternative place where we can be dependent and exploited and taken advantage of, but rather we need to have a kind of economic integration model in the continent that is going to be there for not just developing our countries, but also ultimately making sure that the beneficiaries of that development are the workers in the factories that are actually making the garments and the people of the continent that generally are the ones that have been producing the wealth but not benefiting from it. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
On Tuesday, September 9th, 2025, at the AMA Emporium in Accra, Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jr., the General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, launched his groundbreaking book on reparations, history, struggle, politics, and law. The book was formally launched by the President of Ghana, President John Dramani Mahama, who praised the book for exposing global double standards on reparative justice. In his own speech, Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jr. reiterated that reparations go beyond money and that no amount of money can ever compensate for the brutality of capitalism.
The issue of reparation is not just about the law, but it's also about history, it's about our politics, and it's about the intervention of social forces in Africa. And the lawyers thought that my views would be important in that direction. I hope they found my views useful. I haven't said that. And when the president is around, we don't talk for too long, so I'm about to cut what I'm about to say. I just like to say simply that reparation is not about monetary compensation for the wrongs done to us. Because no amount of money can pay for the evil deeds of the capitalist states. Reparation is about resetting the world. Reparation is about the redistribution of surplus value. Reparation is about reorganizing this world. Because the way this world is structured, the way this world is organized, is weighted against us. And for a long, long time, the United Nations did not have more than 50 members. Why? Because at the time they were constructing the United Nations, we were colonies. And colonies were not members of the UN. So they built a United Nations Security Council. And on that United Nations Security Council, 1.4 billion people of this world are not represented. They have no say. They constructed the IMF and the World Bank. We were not there. We were not at the table. So the IMF and the World Bank was constructed to protect the interest of the colonialists, to protect the interest of the slave owners and so on. It is time to reset the world, to reorganize the United Nations, to reorganize the World Trade Organization and to reorganize and rebuild all these institutions. Because without that, we will never.
And now it's time for our word of the day. Today's word is sovereignty. What does it mean? For African nations, sovereignty is more than just a legal principle. It's a daily struggle to reclaim political, economic, and cultural control from the forces of neocolonialism and external domination. So as we reflect on the alliance of Sahel states at 2, sovereignty remains the foundation of their call for unity, for independence, and for self-determination. Here's more detail.
Hello and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Africa Speaks right here on Pan-African Television. This is your word of the day segment. My name is Vicky Wilson. Today's word is sovereignty. Let's dive into what sovereignty means. Sovereignty is one of the most powerful words in the vocabulary of liberation and yet one of the most abused. Too often, it is reduced to ceremony, a flag raised, a national anthem played, a seat at the United Nations. But sovereignty is not performance. It is power, the power of a people to decide their own destiny, free from domination of one group by another. Today, nowhere is this more clearly defined than with the alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. 3 nations that were written off by the West as poor and fragile have instead become the protagonists of a new definition of sovereignty. These states have done what once seemed unthinkable, expelled French troops, rejected the dictates of Paris, and began to forge a new pan-African path that insists on a right to security, to resources, to development on their own terms for the benefit of their people. In Niger, the decision to nationalize uranium mines is not just a question of minerals. It is a direct challenge to centuries of extraction where African wealth fueled European prosperity while African communities remained in poverty. By reclaiming uranium, Niger is saying the resources beneath our soil belongs to us and the benefits must serve our children and not foreign shareholders. In Burkina Faso, sovereignty has meant launching an agricultural offensive, investigating in domestic agriculture to feed its people, turning away from dependency on imported grains. And in Mali, sovereignty has meant taking control of Africa's largest gold mines and launching its own refinery. Under the umbrella of the Alliance of Sahel States, sovereignty has meant rewriting military partnership, declaring that no foreign army would dictate how Africans defend their own soil. Together, these 3 nations have taken the bold step of leaving ECOWAS, rejecting a national bloc that too often served as a tool for Western influence rather than true African integration that benefits the African people. The Sahelian experiment is more than a regional affair. It is a spark for the entire continent and the world. It raises the hard but necessary questions. If Niger has taken back its uranium, why not Congo with its cobalt? If Mali can build defense without foreign command, why not African nations with their own armies? And if Burkina Faso can prioritize feeding its people first, why not a continental shift where Africa's food, energy, and industry serve Africans before anyone else? Sovereignty is about standing upright in the community of nations as equals, not dependent. It is about Pan-African cooperation on the basis of dignity and not charity. Imagine what a united Africa could do if our resources were pooled, our industries integrated, and our armies coordinated for defense and not subservience. Kwame Nkrumah warned us that political independence without economic control is hollow. And Thomas Sankara showed us that dignity begins when we produce for ourselves. The Alliance of Sahel States today is proving that sovereignty can be reclaimed piece by piece and action by action if leaders have the courage and if people mobilize. This is why sovereignty is more than a slogan. It is a living foundation of our collective emancipation. It demands that Africa refuse to be supplier of raw materials for others and a dumping ground for finished goods or a battleground for foreign armies. It demands that we as Africans shape our own destiny, that we become the protagonist of our own story. The Alliance of Sahel States has declared sovereignty as not negotiable. And if this flame spreads, it will light the path for the rest of Africa towards a future that is not dictated in Paris, Washington, or Brussels, but decided in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou, and ultimately in every African capital by the people themselves. Because without sovereignty, there can be no freedom. And without Pan-African unity, sovereignty itself remains incomplete.
Let's wrap up the show with our history segment. On September 6, 1968, Swaziland, now Eswatini, gained independence from Britain under King Sobhuza II, joining the wave of African nations reclaiming their freedom. A reminder that the struggle for sovereignty and self-determination continues across our continents. Here's a feature story on the history thus far.
September 6th marked the Independence Day of Swaziland, Africa's last absolute monarchy, a country where people for decades have been waging a valiant struggle for democracy. Swaziland was a colony of the British from 1903 and gained independence in 1968, but the momentous occasion was hijacked by King Sobhuza II, who in 1973 assumed absolute power. He proceeded to ban political parties, repeal the constitution, and dissolve the parliament, inaugurating a period of authoritarian rule that continues to this day under his son Mswati III, who is Africa's last absolute monarch. For decades, the people of Swaziland have been waging a determined struggle against the monarchy and the autocratic Tinkundla system, whereby all popular representation is controlled by the king. As per the system, members of parliament are either appointed by the king or elected from a list approved by the king's traditional chiefs. While the people have endured poverty, the king has spent millions to prop up his luxurious lifestyle. Despite the ban, parties like Podemo and the Communist Party of Swaziland have led powerful agitations for democracy. This movement has been hijacked by trade unions and student organizations and has even spread to rural areas despite repression. In 2021, a massive insurrection gripped the country, forcing Mswati to flee. He returned only after his army brutally put down the protest, killing over 70 people. The repression, kidnapping, and torture of activists has not stopped them from agitating for democracy and demanding an end to the monarchy. For Swaziland's people, the battle for true independence, for democracy, and for development continues.
And it's a wrap. That's all for this edition of Africa Speaks here on Pan-African Television. My name is Makiza Latifa. As we mark the anniversary of the Alliance of Sahel States, let's remember that Africa's future will not be handed to us. It must be won through struggle, through unity and the defense of our sovereignty. Until we speak again, let the drumbeat of resistance and liberation echo across our continent. See you soon and enjoy the rest of our programs.